We're going to add some more effects to a subject as we go, but now we're ready to start adding the light effects around our subject here. So I'm going to go back to this layer containing the original extracted subject. I'm just going to reveal a little bit more of the background here. There we go. There we go, okay. Now, flares. I'm a big fan of flares. I'm a big fan of special effects. One of the things that really drew me to being inspired by movie posters is the flares and design elements that you can do with these sorts of things. So I want to show you how I do with flares and some creative things you can do with them, even from a 3D standpoint. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new document. Let's go ahead and save what we're working on now. When I'm creating elements that I'm going to use, design elements or special effects or things like that, I tend to like to create them in their own document. In this particular case, I need it to be a squared document because we're going to do an effect that needs the document to be squared. But the other reason I like to do it is that I like to keep the elements separate. In the event that I do something that I really like and might want to use in another design, I can take that file, save it, and then pull that from whenever I need it again. But it also kind of keeps the file size down by working in another document and just dragging and dropping it over. So I like to look at the final design as just the assembly point of all the cool effects that we have. So in this document, I'm going to make the background black. So I'm going to press Command or Control I. Just inverts the background. So I want to take a flare. Now I've got a lot of flares that I have put together as brushes, which I'm going to include as part of the class download. And I have a collection of flare brushes I'm going to add in here. But I'm going to go ahead and grab this one right here. I think this one, there we go. So I have about a dozen different flare brushes I use. I affectionately call them the JJ flares, because if anybody's seen a J.J. Abrams movie knows what I'm talking about, especially the first Star Trek. Yeah. He went a little nuts with that. But used well, they have a really, really cool effect. So I thought, why not take that into a static design element? So I went and just did a search for all kinds of different anamorphic flares. And at first, I was taking them and pulling the images and putting them on a document, changing the blend mode, and it would look good. It was limited in that way, though. So what I discovered is, why not make it a brush? So here I have a brush, and it's a flare, and it's actually been defined as a brush, and I can just use it all day. And usually flares are on a black background usually, especially if you have a stock image. So you just take the image, invert it, define it as a brush. If I have time at the end, maybe I'll show that trick real quick. So. But this one I define as a brush. Now what I want to do with this flare, normally I would just take it into design. You can actually just go in here and just to give you an idea. Sound effects help too. So you just, there we go. Done. No. But in this particular case, just having the flares themselves, great. They look awesome. But if you start to play with them and some of the Photoshop features, you can do some interesting things with them. Like for here, I'm going to go to make the brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to go to the bottom of the document here, the bottom of this square. And notice I created a new layer right here. And I'm going to go in here, and I'm just going to dab a few flares at the bottom. That's all I'm going to do. Then I'm going to go up here to the filter menu, go to distort, and choose polar coordinates. And you want to have rectangular polar selected. And when I hit OK, now we're going to get a circular flare. And you get to this point and you're like, that's kind of cool. I actually do talk to myself like that too when I'm working. All by myself at home, I'll do something like, I'll call my cat over, she'll jump up and say, look. That's not true. Cat hates Photoshop. But no. So as I was saying, I see this, I'm like, that's kind of cool. So notice it's got a little bit of an edge here. It picked up as it ran the polar coordinates effect. So I'm going to just kind of use my eraser tool, another forbidden tool in Photoshop. The flatten image and the eraser tool, the two most forbidden tools ever. Yet we still use them. So I'm going to do right here where the edges, what polar coordinates does, in case you don't know, is and that's the reason I strategically put those elements at the bottom. Took those elements and wrapped them around in 360 mode, and you'll see that the edges meet here at the top. those are the edges that went right off the edge of the document at the bottom there. So it's kind of just wrapped it up right there. So I'm just going to give a little dab with the eraser tool just to kind of let that fade right there. So now we're going to take this element, again, drag and drop it over. And I'm going to put it at the top of the layer stack here. I'm just going to scale this. And it's going to give us this kind of cool flare out. I'm going to rotate it around. And something about like that. Now, I'm going to put a layer mask on the subject, or on this flare layer. I said it in my head first, and I was like, okay, I'm going to say it out loud. Flare layer. Yep. The flare layer. And I'm going to go in here and get that same gradient tool I've been using, the foreground, the transparent with the radial. And let's kind of give it a fade in areas. Set black as my foreground. Give it a little bit of a fade in areas. I don't want it to be obstructing the subject. Of course, around her face, I'm going to give it a little bit of a fade down here because we're going to have some text elements that we're going to be putting down here as well. So like that. I can see a little bit of the edge of that. Oh no, I still got the flare brush. I was a little confused there. I was like, why is my brush so weird looking here? So there's that little bit of that edge of the flare. See that straight edge there? So I'm just going to go ahead and take care of that a little bit. There we go, okay. Now at this point, the flare looks pretty good, but I want to make it look awesome. So I'm just going to go in here into the layer itself and add a layer style. I'm going to go to the layer style menu and let's just choose outer glow. And let's make it a blue flare. And I think hard light. Yeah, I think hard light. There we go. So give it a blue glow with a hard light blend mode. Really adds something to that flare. And this is another reason, excuse me, I discovered that I liked doing these as brushes because you can create the flare as a brush and then it has the transparency on the layer to add a layer style so that you can get this cool glow like that. And of course, the layer style, it's a layer style. You can go in here and adjust the glow, the intensity of it, or even the color if later on in the process you realize that it's not looking like you hope. You can go in there and change that. So I'll click OK there. So that looks really good. Now what I want to do, now that I've got this flare element in place, what I want to do is actually make it look like the subject is being literally surrounded by this light flare element. Right now, this looks like she's kind of standing in it. If this flare was existing around her, and you got to kind of ask yourself this question as you're designing, especially with human characters, is if this element was surrounding the subject like this, how would the light emitting from it land on the subject? How dramatic would it be? Where would it fall on the subject? So what I'm going to do is create a new layer. And I'm going to make the layer blend mode. I'm going to put it in overlay. We don't see anything change because there's nothing on the layer yet. But what I'm going to do is select this kind of bright blue color in my swatches panel here. Get my gradient tool once again. I'm going to come in from the left side here. I'm just going to use a linear gradient this time. And I'm just going to hold down the shift key and drag in. And that's going to give me, it's going to enhance the glow of the flare. It looks like there's light emanating from the flare and it's casting on the hair of the subject here. Give me that really interesting look there. Isn't that neat? All right. So now I'm just going to go in here and give it a little bit of a flare coming in from this side as well. I'm actually going to do that with a radial, since there's a little element of it here. I'm going to do it like that. There we go. Let me go in here and get a little bit more. There we go.